Okay, so in this section we're going to talk about carbohydrates, and I'm sure you've heard, or I would imagine that you've heard the word carbohydrate before. And so let's talk a little bit more about them. Now for each of these macromolecules we're going to identify what the monomer is, what the polymer is, and you may commonly think of carbohydrates as sugars. Okay, so that may be where you've heard them before. So the monomer is going to be called a mono and then saccharide. Okay, and then the polymer you can either call a di if it's just two, so a disaccharide, or a polysaccharide would be two or more. Okay. And so monomer, examples of common monomers that you may have heard of before: glucose is a monomer, fructose is a monomer. Polymers that you may have heard of are actually sucrose, or even if you've heard of complex carbohydrates, those would be polymers. Okay. In the human body, there's actually many functions for carbohydrates. One of the ones that you must know is that glucose is the major molecule that when you eat your food and you soak up glucose into your blood, it goes to cells and it can be converted to ATP, which the cell uses for energy. The other reason why glucose is so important is that it can be stored for future energy needs. Okay, now if we look at these images down here, this is labeled monosaccharide 1, and so that this part of the molecule is monosaccharide 1. And here we have monosaccharide 2, and you notice they're separate. Okay, these lines, now don't worry so much. Sometimes I have students that they'll see chemical notation like this and they see these structures and they don't understand what they mean and their brains kind of explode. But try not to let that happen to you. The main things you just need to look for is, one, just notice the overall shape. You notice this is really a six-sided ring, a hexagon, and then it's got these atoms sticking up and down off of it. This one, turns out, it is a five-sided figure, and then it also has little lines with things sticking up and down. A lot of times in chemical notation, if you see a line, that means two things are bonded together. Another thing in chemical notation that may help you is that I guess you could say chemists are a little bit, they want to be efficient, and so any place where you don't see an atom, that just means there's a carbon there. They just didn't write it out. Okay, so that's what that means. So here, this monosaccharide, and this is the take-home point. This monosaccharide is separate. It's a monosaccharide. This is separate. And notice now we've got these lines, which means we have bonded them together, and now we have a disaccharide. Okay, so we've done a synthesis reaction. Okay, down here we've got a disaccharide. Here's the bond between the two. We've added water, we get a hydrolysis or a decomposition reaction, and now we have our individual monosaccharides. Okay, so why is this important? Why does it matter? Okay, let's go back to our building blocks. If your body absorbs this, let's say this right here is glucose. Okay, your body absorbs this, it can use it, make ATP. The cell has energy for reactions. But let's say you eat a big meal. Well, you don't want to use all of your energy right then. You may want to store some of it. So your body has stores of glucose. Okay, so this store is called glycogen. And so you eat a meal, you get some glucose, you want to store it. Well, how do you store it? Well, let's just stick that subunit onto your polymer that already exists, your glycogen. Okay? Let's say we had a really, let's say we went to, get some donuts instead of just, having a little carrot. So we got a whole bunch of glucose. Well, let's just make this bigger and bigger, and we'll just keep building this thing up. Okay, so this is our store of glucose. Now let's say we decide to go exercise, and your cells are using up the energy. Okay, and so say you need a little more. Well, here we've got this big polymer. We've got this polysaccharide called glycogen. And so, hey, let's just snap a little glucose off and go use it for some energy. Okay? Wasn't quite enough? Well, let's snap a little more off and go use it for some energy. Okay? Now, something to know is that you can arrange these in different ways. So, if I am an animal, a human being, and I want to store some glucose, it would look like this, and we call this glycogen. But you can actually take these same individual subunits and arrange them in a different way. So we could arrange them like this. And this here is actually what plants do. And you can see it actually looks like a bit of a brick wall, doesn't it? And so this is how plants arrange their glucose to make their cell walls. So again, structure, the shape of something, gives it its function. This right here would be stored energy inside of an animal cell. But this same subunit, but arranged in a different shape, would be a cell wall.